Hello, everybody, and welcome to Shadow at Night. This is Wednesday, July 17th, 2024. Where was I last night? Some of you who saw the social media post saw that I had a medical condition. I've still got it, and I guess I maybe made it a little more dramatic than it needed to be, but there's some kind of a weird bacterial infection going on with my left eye. I thought it was a sty, but the doctor this morning said, no, my friend, you've got something else going on there. And so he gave me some ointment and sent me on my way. And hopefully it works. But yesterday, my face was blown up like a beach balloon. And the eye was kind of half shut. So I thought, nah, probably better you don't go on and make people physically ill with that look. So it's calmed itself down in the last 24 hours and good enough to do a show tonight. Rob Boutilier is an online vlogger. He's got a hell of a big following on Facebook and other social media. He joins the show tonight. He's also a crisis investigator. We had a really good conversation on the phone this afternoon about what it is he does and what he saw this past weekend at the Trump assassination and what we've picked up in the past few days. And when you put all the pieces together, nothing really makes sense, right? So we're going to talk about that and other things like maybe Marxism. You guys have heard me use that word before. Maybe you've heard Rob or seen Rob use that word before. Marxism, neo-Marxism. What is it exactly? There's some people out there who still don't really know. They're unclear on the concept of Marxism versus communism. So I think we can have that conversation tonight for a little bit anyway, before we go ahead and talk about the Trump thing. All that coming up, and there's other news as well. There's other stuff that I'm going to get to in the extension after 9 o'clock Central tonight on the website. If you're an all-access pass holder, you can access that at shadowdavis.com. The show is brought to you by Canada Nano Silver, CanadaNanoSilver.ca, with the immune gummies. Personally, and I know I'm not supposed to do this, because all the products are awesome, but this is my personal fave. It's like picking your favorite amongst all your kids. How do you choose? You're not really supposed to say, but here I am saying it anyway. Immune Gummies simplify your daily immune support with convenient and delicious Nano Silver Immune Gummies. Each serving contains powerful triple action Nano Silver, elderberry, vitamin C, zinc, vitamin D3. This will help supercharge your immune system. Safe and proven Nano Silver. It is the silverceutical technology. Works alongside your body's own immune system to help you stay healthy and strong for everything that life throws at you. Get it online at CanadaNanoSilver.ca or find a retail location near you by going on the Retail Locations tab located in the upper right corner when you first go on the website. It's right there. See, Retail Locations, and they're popping up all across the country now. People are very excited to get in on this and maybe sell it out of their basement or their living room or their spare room or the garage or whatever, because it's that good. And you can make a little bit of extra cash on the side, right? Which I'm sure would come in handy right now with the inflation and the interest rates and whatnot. CanadaNanoSilver.ca. If you would like to become one of these in-person retailers, get a hold of Kevin and Anna through the contact tab at CanadaNanoSilver.ca. Again, that is CanadaNanoSilver.ca. You see his name in the corner. I may as well bring him on right now. Here's Rob Boutilier. Hello, Rob. Thank you for coming on the show tonight. I've been looking at a lot of your stuff lately, stuff that you've been talking about, and I really enjoy your take on things and your attitude towards what's going on these days, man. So thank you for being a part of all of this.
No, thank you, Shadow. I've actually been a fan for quite a while now. I've been following you, and I saw you commenting on some of my stuff, and it was just like, oh, geez, I gotta say something to this guy. He's
yeah, I like this guy, and there it is, the mug, the mug. Did you say you had
version of that one as well?
Did you say you had an online store where you were selling hundreds of those?
I did. I actually ran a clothing brand for a while. This was a couple years ago. It was quite successful, and
yeah.
I had F Commies mugs, F Trudeau mugs, and F Marxist mugs, and I couldn't tell you how many of those things I sold. Another top seller I had was Trump for Prime Minister T-shirts.
Yeah, interesting. We can talk about
split families up.
We're going to talk about Trump in just a second and what's happened, all the developments. There's some new video that's come out of Trump arriving at the hospital, but it's not really a video of Trump arriving at the hospital. That's just how it's marketed to people, and it's put out by Trump supporters. And it looks like a bunch of crisis actors in this video. And what do you see of Trump in this? Maybe a tenth of a second of a guy who looks like Donald Trump walking into what looks like an emergency room. I mean, I know that there's a lot of people out there, Rob, that want to believe this. And I'm one of them. I don't want to be sitting here going, wait a minute, hold on just a second. Before we move forward and get on this bandwagon, we need to have some questions answered. You are a crisis investigator. You have been doing this for a very long time. You're doing it now for a living. As we speak, you go and investigate mishaps, different things in a vast territory in Alberta. Can you tell us exactly what's involved in your job?
So it was actually it was my previous role. I
Your
stopped doing
previous.
that. I did it for about 6 years, and it was serious incident investigations. I was an investigation specialist, and the role was really more focused. I wasn't an expert in any one subject. The job was to get in and learn and understand. And a lot of what I would say I specialize in is layers of control, critical controls, things like that. And what are all of the things that were present or missing that allowed something bad to happen? So I did, just a couple of fatality investigations in the workplace, large financial loss. Typically, the investigations I would do is if somebody almost got killed, I would be brought in to lead the investigation on that type of incident as well. So really, that's with the Trump piece. That's when I started watching that. I started zeroing in on, okay, most of these incidents with no motivation for it to occur, when you break them down to the missing controls or the gaps that were present, they almost seem perfectly designed to happen. And I think with the Trump situation, it's the exact same thing when you look at layers that were either there or weak, but also the strong motivation that was present
Now,
to.
wait a minute. Are you suggesting that when we go back and you do the old, hindsight is always 2020 routine, it looks like, oh, well, that was a perfect setup, as opposed to when it was actually happening and unfolding in front of us in real time?
100%. Well, that was my job. I've done this hundreds of times, and we take every single detail, every single. We've been down to the millisecond on breaking events down into their small bits and pieces, and building that timeline and understanding what was missing at one point in time that allowed that bad thing to happen. And that's the lens that I put on the Trump situation, and it's one of those ones, Shadow, where when you break it all down into its little tiny pieces and you factor in the extreme motivation to take that man out, it's like the whole situation was perfectly designed to happen.
Yeah, have you got the latest? Because we keep getting these little bits and pieces of information that come trickling out to us, and some of it is contradictory depending on the news source you're looking at. And this is ABC News saying law enforcement officials are investigating the assassination attempt on Trump, and they told lawmakers today that 20 minutes passed between the time U.S. Secret Service snipers first spotted the gunman on the rooftop and the time shots were fired at the former president. This is according to law enforcement officials and lawmakers briefed on the matter. We've also heard stories about this kid being spotted in the area hours before the rally was supposed to begin, that he had detonators in his car when they checked afterwards, that he had a rangefinder on him when police found him earlier that day, and didn't question him at all. Now, if you're security on the ground and you see a kid coming to a Trump rally or anywhere near a Trump rally, a rangefinder, meaning how far to this, how far to that. I've used it in golf. People use it in hunting quite often, right? It can tell you exactly how far you are up to a range of, 5,000 meters, let's just say. Maybe more, maybe a little bit less, depending on the make and model. Wouldn't you think that's a little bit odd to find that? And how many discrepancies do we need to see before we come to the conclusion that this was A, a setup, or B, intentional on the part of the Secret Service? Because there's no way they can be that inept.
Well, and that's a firm rule of mine, because a lot of the work I've done involves people and people making mistakes and people either needing to be held accountable or people just making the expected or predictable human error that they would make. And one of the rules of thumb is never attribute to malice what can be explained by incompetence. But the balancing factor there is how motivated are the people or the players involved to coordinate something like this to happen.
Yeah.
So, and really, you can make a lot of bad things happen without intentionally or without appearing to intentionally drive these things to happening. You can make decisions to have incompetent people in place. You can make decisions that leave gaps for things like this to occur. For example, his security detail. They were much smaller than him. They were not capable of covering the target. So,
Are you
so
talking about the two women who were on the detail who were part of the dog pile? Because I still haven't seen exactly how many members of the detail there were. How many were men? How many were women? How many were black? How many were white? I mean, I'm sure they're using that as policy right now in the Secret Service, according to the leader, the director of the Secret Service, who was a big fan of DEI. So let's just say out of the 8 agents that were dogpiling Donald Trump, 2 of them were too small to even move his body. But we can talk about the dogpile. The ineptitude comes in when they let him up so soon after maybe not securing the entire area. So this goes back to what I was talking about a couple of days ago when the dogpile happened, which seemed late to me. What about you? Did you notice that seemed a little bit long?
it seemed delayed for sure. But I think though, when you're dealing with seconds like that, it can seem delayed, but the people on the ground might be experiencing something very rapid
Yeah.
occurring. So that can, that type of thing can often be explained away with incompetence or inexperience or people panicking. I mean, you can drop something and reach down to grab it, and 2 and 3 seconds has passed by at that point in time. I mean, there was a period he was asking for his shoes. That was the conversation that was happening on the ground while he was, while there was an attempted assassination on his life. So they're contending with things like this in real time, right? So there are things that are going to delay their response that can be explained by, not necessarily something that would be incorporated into a plan like this. Just normal human error would cause those things. Right?
Yeah, but training, man. I mean, training takes over in a situation like this as a member of the Secret Service, especially when you're on a detail of protecting probably the biggest threat profile that you've got in the entire system. I mean, let's be honest. This guy is one of the most, if not the most famous person on the planet. He's a very divisive figure. Let's be honest. There's a lot of people that hate him and want to see harm come to him, as we've seen on social media these past few days, which is deplorable as far as I'm concerned. But, you're talking about Secret Service agents that are allegedly trained, and it's ingrained in them, much like an Army officer or, GI, where they will react to their training if a crisis happens. Dogpile the target, and don't let him up or her up until the threat has been secured. They let him up, and not only did they let him up, but they exposed him to an unsecured situation, an unsecured crowd again, to allow for the wave and the photo that was taken, which I'm sure we'll see in history books 100 years from now, with the flag billowing in the background and the fist up and the blood kind of on the face. And that seems too good to be true as well to me. That photo, right? I mean, look at that. That's perfect. The photographer right in front of the stage, he didn't move, or she, I don't know who took it. They're just sitting there taking pictures, watching for that moment, not caring about bullets whizzing by. Now, am I crazy, Rob?
So the way I look at it, Shadow, is people cannot coordinate something successfully on the best of days. But what happens? So the decision to put incompetent people in those roles is one factor that increases the likelihood of somebody getting a clean shot at Donald Trump. So if Trump was surrounded by incompetence, and that incompetence was put in place intentionally, that's one factor that significantly increases the likelihood of him being shot if somebody did have him in the crosshairs. So when we talk about, the dog pile, when we talk about things like that, I don't see them as planned movements. I see them as something we can attribute to incompetence. But my question is, what was the purpose of that incompetence? And when you see all of the steps that occurred, when you see all of the gaps that were left, there was an amazing level of incompetence in everybody involved in that security detail, in the planning leading up to the event, and just very simple, basic things were left wide open. And every one of those layers that were left open that appeared to be due to incompetence they stack up and they increase the likelihood of that target being struck. And you get to a range where you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers of control missing. And luckily, for if this was a coordinated attempt somehow, talk about plausible deniability if every single gap that was left there can be explained by incompetence, right? But you stack these layers up, you stack enough layers up, and you start getting into the range of like an 80% likelihood that that bullet is going to hit its target. That's when we look at the way these things play out, and because over the decades and decades, governments and evil players have gotten very intelligent about how they do this. They first use the media, they first use the people, they first try to assassinate the person, without actually assassinating the person. They try to discredit them. And for 10 years, they've done that to Donald Trump. They've thrown every single thing they can throw at Donald Trump up to this point. And he's not only brushed it all off, but he's come back swinging 3 times as hard every single time. They've been destroyed.
Fight. Where's my shoes?
It's a perfect example, Shadow, but they've been destroyed by their own actions against Donald Trump. And here we are in a situation where what other means do they have to take this man out? They've tried to destroy him for almost a decade with every resource that they had at their disposal, and they failed miserably every single time. In fact, it's the Streisand effect. It backfired considerably every single time. So you think about the special interests that are involved in something like this. What else could they do aside from assassinate this man? What other option do they have at this point? And when I talk about the strong motivation combined with the amazing amount of incompetence here, it's like it's a very justifiable perspective to take that this is a conspiracy and this was something that was coordinated.
Okay, so let's get back to a couple of things that you said here, because I don't know how far down the rabbit hole you go on this stuff. I know you're very evidence minded, so I'm sure there's a lot of speculation, possibly, but let's start at that. Who has got the motivation to take out Donald Trump? Who is it?
China?
Or could it be a consortium of these people?
Well, and let's go
groups.
down the list here. If you really think about it, Trump, you think about the power shift globally. If Donald Trump gets into power, Trump has the ability to crush the economy of China. Trump holds more power over the destiny of the Chinese economy than any single human being probably on the face of the planet. Who would they want to get rid of more than Donald Trump?
I can't think of anybody. Not one.
Russia. You look at the Russia situation. Russia, the ground. So when Trump was in power, Russia could not gain ground. And I can't even begin to explain what Trump would do, but that man has this ability to walk into a situation and shut it down in seconds. And when Trump was in power, these conflicts were not happening. So you get the likes of Russia, and I'm not a Russia or Ukraine supporter. I'm just speaking objectively.
Yeah.
You look at Ukraine. There's a huge amount of skin in the game for Ukraine. Think about Trump gets into power and they start shaving down some kind of deal here. Think about the money that's lost. Think about all of the interests between Russia and Ukraine that are going to be destroyed if Trump gets into power.
Okay, so we're talking Russia, we're talking China, we're talking Ukraine. These are territorial entities. What about people, corporations, complexes? Who might want him dead?
Well, it depends on, and this is where I struggle on the evidence side, because I do think corporations have a major play in politics. I mean, of course they do. Of course they do. You look at the pharmaceutical industry, you look at BlackRock, you look at all of these organizations. I personally don't have enough evidence to know what's at play here. I just know they have an extreme amount of influence. And to be honest with you, I don't know if they're going to be significantly harmed by a Trump presidency.
You're talking about big pharma, corporations?
I'm not sure. I haven't played it out in my mind a whole bunch to see what harm Trump is going to apply to those organizations. Because ultimately the U.S. economy would grow and it would expand and it would be more powerful. So if their operations are within the U.S. and their influence is within the U.S., they'll become financially better off with a Trump presidency. So if we look at
Remember
it,
also that Trump championed the vaccines with Operation Warp Speed. We're going to have Moderna. We're going to have Pfizer. Well, he gave these speeches, over and over and over again for months and months and months until they developed that vaccine, which came out just about the end of his presidency, if I'm not mistaken. But he was the guy who wanted to make sure that those things got developed. And I do recall the Democrats at that time saying, I'm not going to take any vaccine that Trump made, which is kind of funny. And then they made it mandatory.
But again, Chad, I don't know what the consequence to those organizations would be. Aside from they're not going to have control. They will be victim to Trump's decisions, whereas with the Dems in power, they have control over the Dems.
Yeah.
Right. So that could be the loss to them, is that control, that power that they currently have. So economically they might be okay, but they might lose power. They might lose deciding power with the U.S. government if Trump was in power. Right.
What about big tech? I mean, do you think that Trump is going to come in and say, all right, we're going to shut down the censorship? Is he going to come in and clean the slate? Is that the reason these people are so terrified of him?
Well, again,
I mean, there's that Operation 2025, right? Like Project 2025, they're all so scared of, which I'm not sure if you've seen that or not, but it makes perfect sense to me. It's basically on paper draining the swamp. That's what it is.
100%, and they're marketing it as though it's a bad thing. The media side of things, again, I think what's the skin in the game they have is the power. They are an arm of the government at this point in time, and they help the government maintain power, and it's very financially beneficial to them to be able to do that. So, from a power perspective, there's a lot of players in this game that stand to lose power if Trump gets into office. It doesn't mean that a Trump presidency is going to be it's not going to impact them negatively. They just lose control because they can't control the man. They can't dictate what he does. They can't work with him. Whatever he decides is what will be. Whereas with the Dems, they're all working in tandem with each other to make every single thing that the government wants to have happen here, right?
Right. So what about the CIA? What about the NSA, the alphabet agencies, or for that matter, the World Economic Forum, BlackRocks of the world? I mean, is everybody these people, I mean, if you talk about a consortium and you put all this stuff together, I've never really laid this out all at once on the show before like this, Rob, but we're talking China, Russia, Ukraine, big tech, CIA, NSA, Homeland Security, all of the alphabet agencies, and then we can throw in the World Economic Forum, the Bilderbergs, and the Club of Rome, and then we can throw in all the big bankers and the big investment firms, and then finally we can throw in the IMF and all of the central banks. And I mean, that's something pretty rough to go up against.
Well,
and yet here he is.
And that's the motivation that I'm talking about here, where I cannot. So there are governments across the planet assassinate people on a daily basis for much smaller reasons than the motivation that will be present for somebody like Donald Trump. Donald Trump is possibly the biggest threat to power on the planet if he gets into the position as president. So I can't think of a human being that would be more likely to be targeted for an assassination than Donald Trump. So again, when you really break it down, Shadow, it's almost insane that he wouldn't be assassinated, or he wouldn't have an assassination attempt on him.
Yeah, but I mean, like, do you think that look at all of the money at the hands of these people that I just listed, and look at all the operatives that they could enlist, and we got wet boys all over the place. Yeah. Do you think that maybe they could just poison him in his sleep, or they could poison his food, or, I mean, there's any number of ways. I mean, I saw that movie with John Cusack years ago. He had a whole bunch of different ways of doing it, right? They wouldn't have to be such a public thing for them to do this. They could get to him in other ways. I mean, if his Secret Service was in fact compromised, that means that somebody on the inside is on the take. Maybe they could get to somebody on the Trump team, pay them off somehow, let them into his room at night. You know what I'm saying? Like, why does it have to be such a public display? Because if we think of it in terms like that, this public display seems like a show for all of us to watch.
Yeah.
If they wanted him dead, he would be dead, no?
Well, so there's many ways that they could, for sure, but they need to maintain that plausible deniability. It needs to be something that, while there can be many theories surrounding what happened, there's zero things that anybody can say firmly happened. That's what it needs to be. That's the only way they could pull it off, is if they were able to construct a scenario where everything can point to incompetence with no intent. The moment they start approaching that type of operation with intent, that's when it all breaks down, and they stand the risk of having a serious conflict in that country.
Yeah, but my friend, I mean, this is getting to the point of comedy now. I mean, when you look at all the breakdowns, you're looking at, like, if you were watching Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals and you see one team suddenly, if they had Connor McDavid and every best player in the world, lose 12-0 to a bunch of sad sacks. I mean, that's how this looks right now. I mean, it's that obvious that many things went horribly wrong inside, and there's no way, nobody can believe that the Secret Service could be that incompetent. Plus, when you look at the video of that female Secret Service agent fumbling desperately with her weapon, trying to holster it, and then bringing it out and looking at it like, you bad gun, and then trying to put it back in her holster again and not succeeding, and hiding, cowering, behind Donald Trump when she should be on top of him. I mean, it looks like a Melissa McCarthy movie.
But here's where we are: is they came 1 inch from killing that man.
Yeah.
They came. They were. That was a highly successful operation when you really look at it properly, and there's nothing that you can actually firmly say was intentionally done there. Every single breakdown in that entire event can be attributed to incompetence at this point in time. So they have a high level of plausible deniability right now for their involvement in an operation such as that.
You think? I mean, and when you say they, who's they exactly? Are we talking about the Democrats? Are we talking about Joe Biden? Who are we talking about when we say they've got that level of plausible deniability?
Well, when we went through all the players, I mean,
no, I know.
And the thing is, we know the connections amongst all these players. We know that it wouldn't just be China, it wouldn't just be Iran, it wouldn't just be Russia. For something to be coordinated at this level, there'd have to be multiple players involved, including members of the United States government. And this is just, hey, I'm just using my imagination here. This is like a thought experiment for me.
Okay, good. Because now we can start postulating about what might have happened. This is fun. Let's put together a theory. Why not?
Exactly,
I mean, we've been doing it for 60 years with JFK, so let's try it here with the limited amount of information that we have. World Economic Forum. Klaus Schwab, obviously is not walking around as a secret agent. But maybe some guys he knows are. I mean, who do you think killed JFK? Let's go back. Was it Cuba? Yeah.
I think it's the same thing. I think it's a group that all had a vested interest in ensuring that individual didn't survive.
So it's a group of guys, like there's 12 guys all sitting around going, okay, we got to make this happen. And there's no real one leader. It's just a bunch of them.
Well, anything, and again, okay, so I'm just, thought experiment, okay?
Okay.
Anything that engages a group of people, you're going to form some kind of task force. And there will be an appointed leader of that task force. And that task force would be responsible to construct a scenario. And if we think about it from a business perspective, that task force would be responsible to construct a scenario for that business to operate as successfully as possible. So you could easily see a scenario play out. These are all highly professional organizations, highly business oriented, highly educated, highly strategic, highly tactical. In what world wouldn't they form a task force to sit down and brainstorm the best possible way to achieve their objective?
Let's hire a 20-year-old kid and give him access to a nearby roof and a ladder. And then, even after the crowd has spotted him, we're going to wait 2 full minutes before he opens up, the kid opens up on the ex-president before we take him out. I mean, even just saying that out loud sounds completely ridiculous. And then when the chief of the Secret Service comes out and says, well, we didn't plant an agent on that rooftop because it was sloped and there was a safety issue. I mean, I saw a video, Rob, of that very roof. There's a cow walking on that roof. And I went, wait a minute, this is rigged. There's no way this is real.
You see
and
what
it
Musk
was.
did?
No.
There was a sniper on the roof of the White House, and he tweeted it, and he said, wow, looks awfully slopey to me.
That's great.
He's absolutely right, man. But so here's another perspective on that, Shadow.
Okay.
So yeah, why would you hire a 20-year-old kid who can fumble this and make mistakes? And the other perspective here is, though, that they left a vantage point open that was 150 meters away from the target. It was a perfect vantage point to take a shot. The rifle that was used, you could take an inexperienced person, you could take a completely incompetent shooter and teach them how to be accurate enough to hit a pie-sized target at 150 meters with that rifle within 10 minutes.
That's what we've been hearing from all of the expert snipers and counter snipers out there. It wouldn't take long at that range. It's not a hard shot, they say.
So what they did, in fact, again, when we talk about increasing the likelihood of them hitting their target, instead of only opening up that opportunity to trained shooters and snipers, you think about the vast span of people that opportunity was now opened up to because that one vantage point was left open.
Yeah.
So really, again, back to the plausible deniability piece. If you were to try to construct a scenario that you could attribute to incompetence, the best person for that job would be an incompetent 20-year-old shooter. That's who you would want to pick up that firearm and do it. Because if it was a trained, motivated shooter that you could track their experience, like there would be, you would reduce the level of plausible deniability if you took that approach and only left that vantage point open to highly trained individuals. And again, when we think about the success rate here, this was almost a 100% successful operation. That shooter, who was incompetent and inexperienced and 20 years old, and we can say whatever we want about him, he got, I think it was 8 shots off.
Yeah.
And one of those shots hit the target within 1 inch of a fatal blow.
How was he able to get, you see, this is the whole other thing about the incompetence factor that you talk about. He got off 8 shots, man. I mean, Lee Harvey Oswald was only supposed to have been able to get off 3, and we know that he didn't get off 3. We know there were more shots fired. We know that was a turkey shoot. That was a crossfire situation that was set up in the JFK assassination. I mean, anybody with any sense of logic and common sense would be able to come up with that. So do you think this kid managed to get off that many shots, or are we talking about a second and possibly third shooter on site? Have you looked into that?
I actually believe there was only one shooter, because if there was more than one shooter, there was so much opportunity for them to hit that target.
Yeah.
The backup shooter would have had to be an experienced shooter that could have easily hit the target that was presented. And when he overpowered his security detail and stood up and did whatever he wanted, and that security detail did not have enough security detail to cover his body, they could have struck him dead on the spot there. So personally, I don't see any evidence that there was. I see evidence to the contrary. He would have been dead if there was another shooter present. The other thing that you're not hearing a lot about as far as incompetence goes, there was actually 2 serious vantage points left open that are just like, people are baffled as to how these vantage points could have been left open. So there was the 150-meter vantage point that the shooter obtained. There was also a water tower close by, which that's a sniper's paradise right there. To be able to access a water tower at that height with a target.
And it was unsecured. That's right.
Hundreds
you said
and hundreds of meters away. I mean, you could be. I've seen guys with an AR-15 be accurate at 300 meters easily, highly accurate. At 150 meters, if you're a trained shooter, you're hitting a 2-inch grouping with an AR-15. Right? At 300 meters, you might be hitting 4 to 5 inches.
You're a trained shooter, aren't you?
The size of your body, right?
You're a trained shooter, right? You handle guns.
I've taken a lot of firearms training. I wouldn't consider myself to be like a trained shooter, but I did probably, at this point, I'm probably sitting at about 60 to 80 hours worth of pistol training for the most part is what I've done. Black badge, different styles of combat training and stuff like that, right?
So you do speak from some level of experience here then. So let me ask you this. What do you feel happened here? Was it just a complete breakdown? Incompetence? Was there something happening on the inside that we have yet to find proof of it? I know you're a big proof guy, so we're going to have to extrapolate here a little bit if you don't mind. What do you think happened that day?
It's typically, and I forget what the law is called, Shadow. Maybe you can remind me, but it's the most likely thing that happened.
Occam's razor. It's Occam's razor. Yeah.
The most likely scenario that played out is what happened here. And a lot of people will look at this and look at the incompetence and think, well, it's obviously a high level of incompetence that played out. I strongly disagree. So again, this is a thought experiment we're doing here.
Yep.
I look at the motivation to take that man out. There is not a person I can think of on the planet that is a more high value target than Donald Trump. There's not a single person in my mind who is more consequential to a shift in power in the world than Donald Trump. When I think about that motivation, when I think about the amazing level of incompetence, you look at the vantage points, you look at the security detail, you look at the fact that they couldn't even control the man, they couldn't cover his body. There were so many, the layers of control that failed or were missing there stacked up to, that was a strong bet. You're probably looking at an 80% probability of success there based on the layers of control that were missing or failed. When you look at the motivation, when you look at the exceptional amount of incompetency, and when we're talking Occam's razor, the most likely thing that happened here to me was this was a planned operation and this was highly intentional. To me, that is the most logical perspective to take here. Whereas, again, you can sit down and you can just look at it bit by bit at incompetency. But when you look at the big picture here, it's like, holy cow, there's nobody on the planet that would be more likely to be assassinated than Donald Trump. And the amazing level of incompetency is just astounding.
Let me ask you what a person's, and this is an opinion, obviously, you're not an expert on this by any stretch, but let me just, and this is something I threw out the other night. You've been shot. You've been dogpiled by Secret Service members. There's still an active shooter out there somewhere. What's your reaction? I mean, we're talking about instinct now, right? We're talking about, all reason has escaped you at this stage, and you're dealing with complete and total instinct. What would be a normal person's instinct in that situation?
I personally think 99% of people would cower and would be protective of themselves, and they would go into flight mode rather than fight mode.
Right.
But if we've seen anything from Donald Trump, every time that man is put under pressure, every time that man gets squeezed, he comes back stronger than ever, fighting harder than ever, with a vengeance. So to me, for Trump, the most likely thing to happen in that scenario is exactly what he did. I think for most people, you would not see anything like that. But for a guy like Donald Trump, it is no surprise to me that he put his fist in the air and told everybody to fight, fight, fight after being shot by an attempted assassination.
Now, apparently, the next morning, he was playing golf at Mar-a-Lago before flying out to Wisconsin, or is it Wisconsin? Yeah, it's Wisconsin for the Republican National Convention with this massive Band-Aid on his ear. There's video of him getting into his golf cart, waving at people as he drives off to the first tee. And then he's in the plane. I mean, we've got video of him arriving at the hospital, allegedly. If you could mute yourself for a few seconds, Rob, we're going to put this out there for people to see. You guys go ahead and be the judge. Is this real video? Let's make it big so everybody can see here. Is this real, because we're not going to see Trump very long in this video. And the video itself is only about 25 seconds. Is this real or is this staged? You guys be the judge. Throw it in the comments.
Who was that? Oh, sorry. No, they're bringing I see all of them.
Oh, look, there's the Melissa McCarthy right there. That's Secret Service in front.
Oh yeah, we're front row, and my friend saw blood coming out of his head.
Oh my God. Oh Jesus.
There he is.
Oh,
There he is. There he is.
Okay.
There he is.
There he is. Shit. Oh, thank God. He's walking.
He's walking. He's walking.
And that's it. That's all we get. That's all we get, Rob. If you could unmute yourself, what do you think of that video?
I honestly don't know what to think, Shadow, because again, like I'm thinking, like from a workplace perspective, if somebody gets an infection in their eye like you did, they're taking the hospital at work. So it would be no surprise to me that he did go to the emergency room and get some treatment and get checked out to make sure that he was healthy and happy and safe the whole 9 yards, right?
He does not appear in that video at all. Do you notice that? I mean, from the vantage point that it's being taken, somebody stands up in front of the camera, right? But you do get a very small glimpse of possibly somebody who looks like Donald Trump going through the front doors. It just seems ridiculous to me at this stage of the game.
Yeah.
Like, right?
Well, and there's so again, and what I'm loving about this is the left is doing everything possible to try to somehow make him look bad. I looked at a thread on X today, and it was people who were debating the bandage on his ear and how inappropriate the size of the bandage was and how that means that the was fake. And I was like, this is just fucking stupid at this point, guys. Like, you are really grasping at straws here. If the only argument you have is the bandage does not look like a typical bandage someone would use on their ear after getting shot. Right?
Yeah.
The other argument I'm hearing a lot of is there's a lot of people who are arguing now that he couldn't have gotten shot in the ear because the force from the bullet would be such that even if it grazed you, it would damage your face significantly. And, the point I keep making to these people when they bring that up is, have you ever shot a paper target with a high caliber bullet? If you have, you know that the size of the hole in that target is the size of the bullet.
Yep.
There's no other damage done to that target than what the bullet touches on the target. So the same thing goes for a human body, is you're not going to get within an inch of somebody and do damage with a 5.56 .223 caliber bullet just because it got close to them.
I just find all of this so incredible, and it's interesting times we're living in, man. I mean, how long, Rob, have you been aware of all this? Are you one of these guys that has been aware and awake for 20 years, or is this a recent thing for you?
2000, it was actually August 11th of 2017 is when I made my first video. And I wasn't aware. I wasn't engaged. I was a young dad, little kids in the house. The Liberals were in power, and the NDP got in power in Alberta. And Shadow, I was so angry that the only outlet I had was to start talking about politics and my thoughts. And it was really a relief valve for me getting into this. And as I researched more and learned more and enjoyed content creation and everything, that's where I really started learning about the ins and outs and developing, of course, like everybody, I started out believing what I heard and, listening to politicians and their intent and what they said and taking their word for it. And gradually, you get burnt enough times, which is it's part of the process. You learn who to trust, who not to trust, and how to form your own opinions. And, here I am, 2024, and I've got a vast amount of opinions that conflict with almost every one of my followers at some point or another, but there's logic, right? They make sense, right?
How far down the rabbit hole have you gone? And because, politics is one thing. Yeah. And I completely understood when Trudeau got into power in 2015 that we were in for it, especially, and I thought it was going to be worse if they formed some kind of a coalition with the NDP. And then years later they did, and I went, oh my God, this is going to be so bad for the country. But I was completely, at that stage anyway, completely and totally unaware of the World Economic Forum and the Club of Rome. And so over time, you get all of this information, and I have been completely updated over and over again through this entire awakening process for me. And it seems like just when you're on cruise, something else comes and kicks you right in the testes, right? And you go, oh my God, I can't even believe this. And this, I think this past weekend is probably one of those moments that means something, but we just don't know exactly what it means yet. How far down that rabbit hole have you gone? At what point do you think the Great Reset is actually going to completely and totally be upon us? Or do you not even believe in that?
So I do believe that there is a massive shift happening, and it's a gradual, painful shift, and people are fighting and brawling every step of the way against it. I don't think it's smooth. I don't think it's an easy transition for these leaders to step into. But what I do think is, I'll tell you, where I go to with this stuff, Shadow, is not a highly organized and coordinated effort. I more look at it as there's a very limited number of strategic points leaders need to hit to break down society, right? And if they hit those notes effectively, then they can actually, like I've always been about low investment solutions, so low cost solutions when it comes to stuff. And if I'm thinking from a leader's perspective, a world leader, a leader of a country who does follow Marxist ideology and wants to implement those principles, I'm thinking, what's the biggest bang for your buck? And there's a very limited number of things you would have to do to cause what we're seeing right now. So I don't look at all of the actions as intentional. I look at a very limited number of actions as intentional that lead to what appears to be a coordinated effort. For example, I'm not a highly religious person, but I have done my research into what Satanism is and isn't. And Satanism is not a worship of Satan. Satanism is a worship of self. And to take a society and lead it down a path that you not only justify worshiping self and giving into all of your carnal desires, but you in fact convince people that it's morally superior to do that, that's a great way to completely erode society and values and morals and principles, because who doesn't want a great reason to be a degenerate?
I don't.
So if you can actually convince society that it's not only fun, but it's morally superior to be a degenerate, right? That's a high leverage move you can make in society to gain a lot of control.
And interestingly, it's funny you say that too. It's a very good point, because they're having a hell of a time doing it to us, those of us who have got ingrained values, right? Societal values, Western values. So what do then? They go after our children, those who have not yet developed those values completely, right?
Yep. And all they need to do, Shadow, is they just need to do a limited number of things very well repeatedly and relentlessly. And eventually it gets ingrained in future generations. You look at China's plan to become a world superpower and take over the planet, basically. This is not a short-term thing. This is a generational strategy these people use.
Yeah.
So again, when I look at this stuff, I'm not a conspiracy-minded person, but I do see a very limited number of high leverage movements that these people can make that would give them massive amounts of power over society, that would completely destroy everything that the substance of everything that holds the glue that holds society together. You could obliterate that glue with a very limited number of highly strategic movements and actions and things that you could do to actually destroy. When you look at the erosion of Christianity, again, I'm not a religious guy, but I'm a firm believer that that's important. That is a very important thing, because aside from having a morals-based, like a religion or something like that, the only other option is we all do what we like to do. And we all like to be degenerates. We all like to serve ourselves. We all like to do what makes us feel good. So as soon as they break down that structure, you're left with a society filled with people who are self-serving, materialistic, and only do what they want to do that benefits them and makes them feel good.
And this has been going on for quite some time. Have they implemented everything, and are they in repeat mode right now, do you think?
Well, they're still in repeat mode because there's still a long way to go here. There's still a lot of fight left in us. But again, it's a generational strategy. It's something that they need to repeat for 30, 40, 50 years. Well, you look back in the 1900s, the 1920s, 30s, 40s. You look at how strong, how cohesive society was. You look at how strong the family unit was, and it took them 50, 60, 70 years to get us to the point we're at now, and they're still not there. You're probably looking at the same repeated movements, the simple things that they're doing over and over again for another 20, 30 years until we see a complete breakdown of things, right?
You think it's going to take that long?
I think so. Yep, I think so. I think there's a really strong holdout here of people like ourselves who don't give up and don't want to. But what's going to happen is we're going to die.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And really
Eventually.
that's their only hope is when this contingent of people who are strong-minded and willed and know what's happening, they play a much longer game than we do.
It's interesting that you should say that. I had a conversation this morning while I was waiting outside the doctor's office at 8:30 a.m. with an older fella. And he was just standing there minding his own business. I walked up and I thought, well, let's have a conversation while we're waiting. So we started talking, he and I, and I'm trying to size him up as I'm looking at him. And I'm thinking this guy's got to be 81 years old, in around that area. Turns out, came out in the conversation about 5 minutes in, that he was 99 years old. And he had been, he had this little growth on his face, and that's why he was at the doctor. But we had this incredibly fascinating, incredibly stimulating conversation about how life used to be. And he was lamenting the breakdown in our society and some of the things that he's seen in the last few years, although he couldn't put his finger on it, Rob.
Yep.
He didn't quite know what it was.
Yep.
And I thought, this is interesting. I wish we had time to go deeper into this. But there's a guy who saw it, right? And those people aren't left. Those people, the guys that we used to see on Remembrance Day in school, remember they were battles, hardened guys from World War II or Korea.
Absolutely.
Those guys would come in and they would tell us how the war was, how it really was. They were there. They were on the front lines. Well, you're not going to get those guys coming into schools anymore because those guys are mostly all gone.
Yep.
So how is it that the kids these days can even understand and comprehend what a real war is like? They can't. And so they've become soft and complacent and victims. And there's nothing that you and I can say about it because we weren't in the wars. We only heard the stories about the wars. So all we're doing is just relating stories we've heard from people who were there.
Yep.
And I think that's what they've been waiting for. They're waiting for the last of that breed to die.
Well, and not just that, Shadow. Like, if you have a population that's comfortable and satisfied and fed, they're not going to fight.
Yeah.
That's another factor here. So back then, people felt motivated to fight. People felt that things that completely go to the wayside now, people felt those things were important and you needed to take a stand on those things. And that's missing today. Nobody feels that. Everybody's content. You look at how far we've been pushed and there's been no fight. You look at how far it's eroded, and there hasn't even been close to a fight. The best thing we had was the trucker convoy. That was a brief period of time that gained some traction, but Shadow, that's the best we had. And where did that go? Right? Got
stomped out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
In 2 days, they were able to take it out. And, for as much as I'm not going to sit here and say, it failed, it was a failure, because it wasn't. I believe that the legacy, that was one of our finest moments as far as I'm concerned as a country. That should be, in Canada's highlight reel, right? Like all those vignette moments that we see on TV, we used to see on TV. They've kind of taken that away too, haven't they? Yeah. Canadian vignettes, we don't see those anymore. I wonder if that's by design. But
pride in country is not something that's permitted anymore. It's not something
well, we're the world's first post-national state. So where do we go from here now, Rob? What do we do? What is the next play?
So back to the trucker convoy. You know, when that was happening, I was very optimistic. But what I was saying was, this, if this is the start of something bigger, then we're going to actually win. We're gonna bring the pendulum back to where it belongs.
Yeah.
That's where I was waiting to see what happened. And the trucker convoy was not the start of something bigger. It was the bigger thing. And that's where I kind of lost hope. And unfortunately, Shadow, like we can fight until our last dying breath, but we are on a slope towards what our leaders want us to be and want us to have and want us to live like. And I personally don't know what the right thing to do here, because let's just call it a thought experiment. There was a time when this type of thing would have been met with violence. It would have been met with the strongest opposition you could possibly imagine from the populace. You know, they would have gotten 10% as far as they had.
When you
And
say this
they
type
wouldn't
of
even
thing, are you talking about the DEI? Are you talking about the trans? Are you talking about the Palestine protests, or all of it all together?
I'm just talking about the entire shift in society that we're seeing.
Okay.
All of the erosion we're seeing. There was a time where that would have been met strongly by the populace. And here they've pushed us further than they ever pushed a population. And what's everybody doing? A lot of the population is fighting to allow them to continue doing it.
Yeah, that's the
Right.
problem. I mean, it's you look at that and you go, I can't even believe that you people have been so brainwashed as to think that what you're doing is for the greater good.
Yeah.
And they do. It's insane. And when you ask them, and sadly, that conversation wound up this morning with that older fella, that 99-year-old guy, him hating on Donald Trump. He did not like Donald Trump. He thinks that Donald Trump is going to be a dictator. And I asked him why. And he said, well, it's just because that's what they say on the news. And I went, oh, no. Oh, no. So he has been brainwashed by the left-wing corporate media.
Yeah.
And he's not coming back. I mean, I suppose if I'd had more time with him, I might have been able, because it was a really good conversation up until then. But then, Rob, it became, he was incensed at just the sound of Donald Trump's name.
Yeah.
He became, and so maybe that's some kind of conditioning that we've been put through. Maybe it's a combination of media and this vaccine or whatever. I have no idea, man. But
It's purely the media influence, because what the media tells you about Trump is he says mean things and he's an asshole. That's what
Yeah.
the media tells everybody. What they don't tell you is how many lives were saved during the Trump presidency because of conflicts that didn't start, because Trump is a strong man, but he's a peacemaker, because people know if they fuck around with Trump, it's going to hurt really badly.
Yeah.
You don't hear about the hundreds of thousands, potentially millions, like that conflict with Ukraine and Russia. I strongly believe with a Trump presidency that would have fizzled out and that wouldn't have gone very far. So when you look at the lives, just look alone at the lives that could have been saved or that were saved during a Trump presidency, that is every reason in the world right there to absolutely adore that man. And what do these people say? Well, he said something mean about Hillary Clinton and Rosie O'Donnell.
It's not even what he said. It's what the MSNBCs or the CNNs are saying that he said, which is completely bogus. They keep lying about, or partially lying about the things he said. And he caused an insurrection is what the gentleman said to me this morning. And I said, no.
Bullshit I ever heard in my life.
Yeah, he told people to go home. He did not cause it. He told people to go home. That's what he
Not to
said.
mention, Shadow, like the man gets no credit. The largest funder of terror on the face of the planet was on its knees. Iran was on its knees under Trump. China was on its knees under Trump. All of these major players that are committing atrocities were terrified of the man. How is that not a net positive for the entire globe? But again, they'll be like, he said something mean. Oh, I guess he's a terrible person, right?
Yeah.
But again, Shadow, they tried for almost a decade to dig something up on that man to ruin his life. And I think it says a lot that after almost a decade of trying, even when they fabricated things, they couldn't make them stick.
Yeah. And they keep trying and the same old, like that debate between him and Biden, right? Like, what did Biden say? What did he bring up? Was it the thing he was supposed to have said in Europe regarding the veterans, the suckers and losers or something, right? Like that's been completely debunked over and over and over again, and Biden still brought that up. Rob, it's been a great time having you on the show tonight, man, and you're welcome back at any point. How do we find you on social media? Are you all across, or are you on one specifically?
So my main following is Facebook, just Rob Boutilier. My name right on the screen here. It's just the blog page. I'm actually my title there as as Canada's premier political supermodel is labeling myself as there. And then I do have I'm on Instagram. Rob.boutilier.actual is my Instagram tag. I've got another large following on TikTok. Everybody attacked me about TikTok Shadow, and they're like, "Oh my God, China's spying on you." Guess what? Every government has every piece of information they want on me. TikTok's no different. It's just because it's a Chinese platform. Everybody loses. So I've got a huge following on TikTok, and I'm the patriotic dad on TikTok. So anybody who wants to look me up can follow me on those platforms.
And so what do you do? Like, you do 5-10 minute videos, just rants every now and again when you're feeling like something is a little bit off?
I worked with a lot of media organizations. I'm actually part owner in the Buffalo Tribune, an indigenous media company, and we really tried to schedule my rants and build contact and scripts and stuff like that, and it just sucked because I'll tell you, Shadow, when you see a video come out that I made, it's because I was sitting there pissed off and I had something to say. Yeah, and that's my schedule. When I get pissed off, a video comes out.
Well, you got to get pissed off more often, man, because I like your stuff. Thanks, Rob, for coming on tonight, man. We'll find you and follow you on TikTok and Facebook and all the other ones we can find you on, and you're welcome back anytime, my friend. Thank you.
Awesome, man. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on.
All right. There's Rob Boutilier, you guys. You can find him as the Pissed Off Dad on TikTok, like you just said, or find him, Rob Boutilier, on Facebook. I think he's got 70,000 followers on Facebook, which is more than I have. Now, having said that, I had a conversation with Facebook, was it yesterday or today? And they told me that they haven't been suppressing my page whatsoever. And hey, you know what? They're right. I mean, a lot of the posts that we've been making on the page lately have gotten big circulation. One the other day got 2,000 likes and comments and 20,000 views. And this walk and talk video I did the other day got 42,000 views, something like that. But when it comes to actual followers on the page, they refuse to let it grow any larger than 53,000. It'll get to 53,000 and maybe 60 or something. And then it just starts to, it goes down and down and down again, all in 12 hours. I'll lose 100 followers, and then they build slowly back up, and then they go down again. And I asked them, I said, are you guys shadow banning me? Are you taking followers? We don't do that here at Facebook. So then I had a conversation with Meta AI last night. Meta AI. You guys can actually do this too. Just open up your messenger on Instagram or Facebook and ask Meta AI to come on, have a chat with them. And you can ask questions. And Meta AI actually said to me, yeah, Meta shadow bans. You should call them up and find out why. I said, is this page shadow banned? And Meta AI said, I really can't answer that. You'll have to talk to them. But yeah. Meta does shadow ban. So Meta AI admitted it, but the employees of Meta will not. I find it very interesting. As the censorship fight continues, if you guys want to make sure you get this show completely uncensored, who knows when they're going to take it down off YouTube or Facebook, even on Rumble and X, I'm concerned, make sure you become an all-access member at shadowdavis.com, SHADOEDAVIS.com. We're going there in just a couple of minutes for the extension. We still have much more to discuss, you guys. Much more to discuss. And if you're not going to join us there, I'll catch you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Central for another Shadow at Night live stream. I love you all. I appreciate you all, and I'll talk to you tomorrow night or in 2 minutes on the website. See